Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
A few technical glitches just
man.
before we get started. But yeah.
Hey, good?
Good, thanks.
Are we going to talk about the weather again?
Yeah, bloody hell. Man. Well, the wind's pumping outside, all causing all kinds of technical things, and I think it's
The Windy City is living up to her name.
man, oh man.
Yeah.
4 seasons in one day.
In
Here
one
we
day.
go.
Yeah. Welcome everybody to episode number 9.
Can you believe it?
Yeah,
There we go.
It's been amazing. Yeah, going on about 2.5 months worth of these conversations around life, love, and everything else in between. The As Above, So Below podcast, musings around the soul, the soul's journey, living life holistically, I think, around what it means to be dads raising kids. We were laughing earlier about our I've got a golden retriever Max and your German Shepherd. Katinka regularly saying hello on the podcast. Everybody quite familiar with her. But just the joys of life and the soul's journey thereof. So always a pleasure. To everybody who's watching and listening, thank you so much for joining us on the journey, and really comment from me to you, a gift. These conversations really are a gift. Thank you.
And so to me, Dean, it's been incredible to share the space with you and to see what comes into the space. Besides Katinka's bark every now and then and the wind clanging in the background, I think that is what we're trying to introduce here, and to share a space where both psychology and religion, and I say that very lightly, but spirituality and psychology share many commonalities and yet are also paradoxically counted against each other. And it's such a privilege to be able to share the space with you where none of that is present but the commonality, and finding a way of exploring topics and ideas. So, from that side, I want to say thank you to everybody that's come along this journey with us so far. And maybe I can just say and introduce today that there's a bit of a heaviness in me, because Dean and I sometimes have, as you know, and as we've said before, these conversations arrive quite organically, and we don't prepare before the time exactly what we're going to say or do. But there's a topic and there's a broad idea and skeleton maybe in our back of our minds. And so as we were talking before the time, there was a heaviness that set in, because we started to touch on quite a few heavy ideas before we sat down and started this. And I think maybe we can start there, because as it was introduced on Instagram, the idea of the wounding of men, the idea of what it means to be a man in society. There's massive movements happening at the moment. Jordan Peterson, of course, is the spearhead of the world of men and the rise against totalitarianism and the feminist movement against men. As he sees it and experiences it, there's things like the within the religious community, mighty men.
Uncle Angus.
Yeah, Faith Like Potatoes. Love the movie. But there's a lot of movements that are trying to connect and understand and get men to reconnect to themselves. Yeah. And I guess that's what we're talking about today. What is it like? I had a chat to Dean the other day, and we were talking about, and I think that's what sparked it, we were talking about what it's like to carry a family, to be a man that has a family, children, the responsibilities. And I think post-COVID, we're talking maybe very respectfully talking on behalf of the experience of many men out there, and many people that carry a masculine feel of, I need to be responsible, I need to protect, I need to
Yeah.
guide, I need to make plans.
Yeah.
I need to be the warrior, I need to be the king, I need to be the magician. And then I also need to be the lover. I need to connect and relate. So there's a lot that we have to carry as men.
Yeah. One of the things that have always stood out for me, speaking about these Christian movements or church movements around men's things in particular, they've often been almost spearheaded by these particular people who have had particular ideas about what they think the man should be doing. But I found it always very interesting how it's in response to what the woman should be doing. Because she should be in the kitchen looking after the kids so that he can do X, Y, and Z. I heard Uncle Angus say that many times. You look after the kids, make sure that there's food so that your husband can be in the room praying. And don't let the kids bother him while he's doing that. What I often heard people saying, not just Uncle Angus, I went to Mighty Men's movement on his farm out in Greytown, 100,000 men, unbelievable, absolutely. Please don't get me wrong, move of God, it was unbelievable. 100,000 men singing Amazing Grace. What was this, 10 years ago, if not longer, 15 years ago, where we did that,
If I may, what did this do to you? What was the...
I think I was 20, I must have been 20 years old, 21 years old, a young man trying to unpack his faith, trying to unpack his life in terms of what it means to, like you're saying, be a man. 2021, that's what you're trying to do, trying to figure out how to sharpen a sword so that you can go for it. It was it gave me a foundation, it gave me a picture of what it meant to move in a particular direction. Even as I'm talking now, I remember one of the things Uncle Angus spoke about, even me calling him uncle now, I think that's how he wanted people to refer to him, was forgiving men for the certain things that they had done in our lives, and him encouraging us to go home and forgiving people. So I remember me going to my brother and forgiving him for certain things that he had done, things that I'd been holding on to or carrying around for a long time. So I remember some of those moments, some real fond memories.
Healing.
Yeah, healing moments, genuinely. But there was also another side of the coin that I just could never ever shake. And there were these moments of, even today, when people would use the term biblical manhood. Or you should have a biblical marriage. Or we should strive after biblical leadership. And you even, I hope you don't mind me, trying to double click on one of the things you said there. What does it mean to be a mighty man? That in Christian circles we take from David and his mighty men who went and slaughtered army after army after army in David's pursuit of what it meant to become king. So on one hand, we are very, very keen to say we should be biblical men and be like David. But David slept with somebody who wasn't his wife, got her pregnant, and then got somebody in his army to kill her husband in the process so that he could bring her into his temple as his wife. That just wouldn't fly in today's society. We just wouldn't allow that person back to church. Never mind have that person on our leadership. Never mind look at that person and go, what a man. Took another man's wife, had the dude killed, and is quite excited about that. His son, Solomon, somebody who we also really look up to, and in early days Solomon, we all love preaching that Solomon was somebody who prayed to God for wisdom, not just wealth. And we go, a godly man. But if we follow the story, we're not even sure that Solomon was following God at the end. kind of committed so many war crimes. It politically is a nightmare. The amount of wars he went into. And you can read about how much gold he had, how much concubines he had, how many horses and chariots and armies he had. So I say that in a context of what does it mean to be a man? But what we often do is we go and we say, well, biblical manhood. And these are these men that we look up to. Whereas Jesus, to kind of try and land this plane a little bit, rides into Jerusalem on a donkey, not on a white stallion with a sword in his hand, which the people are actually quite upset about.
But Dean, that's not the image that's created for us to follow as men. What you talk about when you say David and Solomon, those are the icons with the underlying dynamic for us to follow. So the icons in our society, we've got to be like a doyen of business. We have to be an expert. We have to be all-powerful, all-knowing. We have to be godlike in some ways. We have to, and that's a very important thing, that feeling of becoming impervious to any attack, any weakness, any inferiority, any emotion. You know, it seems like that is the icon of what we have to choose and go
strive for.
Yeah.
No, it is, and we do strive for those things because they do, as you say, give us strength and security. And we think those are the things to strive for. But I find quite interesting, we often like to say things like the women are the more emotional types. I mean, as a psychologist, is anger an emotion?
Yeah, it is. It is a fundamental emotion, and if I can go back, you're bringing in something that's important here, the relationship between men and women. And I think the one fundamental truth that I would like to say as what do we sit with in terms of being a man and the experience of being a man, is that men are fundamentally wounded. Men are fundamentally wounded in our society. They carry wounds that allow them to go back to that feeling that men feel inferior, they feel ashamed, they feel powerless.
Yeah.
Men carry that sense about who they are. And the problem in our society, and what Jordan Peterson is touching on, to reference him, is that men are trying to deal with that wound. Men are trying to get away from the wound. Men are fundamentally wounded, and it's part of their natural journey in life to be wounded. So if I put that aside a bit and I explain what is it that men go through. See, every single boy is raised by a mother. And a mother, or a mothering person, that he has to move away from. And he has to, normally here around about adolescence, he starts to change. And he starts to yearn to become part of the world out there. Testosterone is kicking in, and he wants to get out, and he wants to do all kinds of things that show his natural tendency toward being a man. Play rugby and all those traditional things or whatever, but it's a physical thing. And in order to do that, he's got to separate from his mother. He's got to separate from that sense of safety that was this dangerous world out there, to get away from the gender roles, right? So the world of women is safe. The world of the mother, as an abstract concept, is safe. The world that he moves out into is the world of the father. It's dangerous. You have to get away from the sense of safety. And in order to do that, a man is naturally wounded, because you have to give up that safety. You have to have that sense about it. So the natural wound is the mother wound. And in order to negotiate the mother wound and its pain, what men have done through thousands of years in the patriarchal society that we've created, it is in relationship to the mother that we are wounded, and the reaction to that is to hide our sense of shame, our feeling disempowered, our feeling of powerlessness, basically, feeling inferior. And in order to do that in our society, unfortunately, we move to the opposite, and goes back to what you say about David and Solomon. We commit war crimes, we control women, we overpower them, we improve ourselves in such a way that we feel we are impervious to this femininity, and we cut off emotions.
No, we're untouchable, yeah.
How's that for a wound?
Yeah. No, we have to, I mean, big boys don't cry, You, from an early age, were told, no man, suck it up, and move on. You don't cry around here.
Yeah.
And I don't say that as a, we're often told not to be emotional as men. Don't be so emotional. But I think, like I was trying to hint at earlier, anger is an emotion. We're very good at getting angry. So who's the more emotional sex?
Well, there's the thing. People will say, "Oh, women are more emotional."
Yeah.
I don't agree.
No, I don't agree at all.
I think women are more in touch with their emotions.
Okay, so that's a very interesting differentiation. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, they're allowed to be more in touch. Men have to cut off certain emotions.
Yeah.
And you mentioned anger. I mean, for me, anger is a very healthy emotion. Anger is necessary, and anger is there to help you muster up the energy to be able to separate. When do we feel anger the most? You're not there yet. I'm fully immersed in it. You've just gone past the first phase. Children feel anger at the age of 2.5, temper tantrums, all of those things. And also then again in teenagehood, you see these temper tantrums come up. Why is it those two? Because at around about 2.5 years of age, the mother is sitting with a child that has just been potty trained. They can walk. They're quite able to start organizing their own life a little bit, feel a bit independent. But they've got to negotiate this ambivalence and this tension between still being a little child, needing mother, but feeling independent.
Yeah.
So the anger is helping them assert their identity.
Yeah.
And of course the same...
I'm laughing because it's Elizabeth right now.
Yeah.
3.5, wants to put in her own sugar into her own tea and loses her mind if I do it. She has to assert her independence. I'm going to put the milk in myself. Don't put the milk in my cereal. I'll do it myself.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Unreal.
Yeah. This is my identity.
Yeah.
This is who I am. And well, I'm sitting with 2 teenagers in the house. Pray for me. But so anger is important, but it can become malignant. It can become the opposite.
Yeah.
When Robert Moore talks about, he's a Jungian analyst that writes about the archetypes of men, and he talks about the warrior archetype. And the warrior archetype needs the anger. He needs to have that sword to be able to cut a new path. But he can do the opposite too. He can destroy. So how we hold our wounds consciously allows us to use the anger to express it, rather than become unconscious about it and destroy it. And it just feels to me that our society is not consciously working with these emotions and identities so that we can move forward in a conscious and collective and individual level and work with it in a positive and constructive way.
Yeah, I think you touch on something that's quite significant, I think, for individuals, but as well as on the collective, to be consciously aware of those things, to be able to move through them. And so unfortunately, I think we just push those things to the side. And we don't want to deal with the things that make us angry. So we get angry, we cuss a few times, we say a few swear words, and then we carry on. We shout at our wives because of X, Y, and Z. Our kids irritate us because of X, Y, and Z. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, the wound that we're carrying, that limp that we're carrying around, if we sat and went, I feel X, Y, and Z, and it is affecting the way that I have relationships with A, B, and C. But what happens is, I think we hide from a lot of those things, and we fall into childlike patterns because we don't know how to transcend those wounds or even try and heal those wounds. That we just don't know how to move beyond them. And so when I think about wounds that I'm carrying, and it's an interesting exercise. I've done it while trying to sit by myself, trying to sit in silence and trying to be more proactively aware of these things. That if I ask you or anybody at any point to go, think about one of the saddest moments you had as a teenager in your first year of high school. There's a memory there. Think about when you were 15 or 16 and the first girl who rejected you. There's a memory there. Now, let me ask you, how many times do you treat the significant other in your life in a negative way because of that memory or because of that hurt? I hate dancing at weddings. Ask me why.
I can guess.
When I was 13, at my grade 7 farewell, a bunch of girls laughed at me when I was dancing with my friends. 13. I'm talking 23 years ago. A bunch of girls laughed at me. And me, a grown-ass man, doesn't want to dance at a wedding with his wife because of insecurities he's still carrying around.
There it is, eh? There it is.
And I'm so ashamed and embarrassed to try and talk about it because, men, we don't do that.
But there it is, eh, Dean?
I'm going to sit at the bar with a beer.
We deny our feelings, we cut them off, we don't open them up.
Not going to open it up.
We're not allowed to do that, I think, in our society. Like you say, our fathers tell us, don't cry. Our societal fathers, everyone, don't cry, don't show your emotion. And you know what's funny? We bring the idea, I'd like to bring the idea of what happens in war. Because we are not allowed to show our weakness. In fact, we war against each other. We keep each other in check. We make sure that our brother knows that there is no way that you can show any weakness, and I will not show any weakness against you.
No.
So it escalates into a war. How many times do you see two brothers that are very close to each other, and they're fighting and it escalates until there's a broken bone or something like that,
No, people often ask, Cain and Abel is one of the most famous stories, early Genesis. People ask me, do you think it happened that way? Cain and Abel, story with God, who brought the better gift? And I say, maybe it's not important whether it happened that way. But does it happen that way these days? Yeah.
All the time.
All the time. How many sons are willing to say or to their brothers, you're mom's favorite. You're mom's favorite. See, look at the way mom's treating you. Mom doesn't treat me that way.
So it's there, isn't it? The mother wound is there.
So what we can take an old story from Genesis. Who brought the better gift? Around the dinner table, which son brought the better gift? And those things are the poisons that eat at our identity around what it means to be men. I will never let her see me cry. I will never let her fill in the blank.
I'm thinking, Dean, that as we're talking about this, and I put myself on the other side of the camera, I'm imagining what happens, as I do in therapy situations. And I can't tell you how many times you're talking about this, and this is an underlying emotion that rests in people. And yet they're unable to bring this to bear in a relationship. They're unable to bring it to consciousness or awareness or a sense of honesty to admit to this. And people would rather walk out of therapy, walk out of a situation, because this is not the way it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to be the strong man that takes care of my family. Because what is the alternative? And I think it's not so much what we bear. That can change, as it is what we don't acknowledge. That which we can't or couldn't have on the outside. The love, the connection, the openness, a father that sheds tears with us, the father that carries the wound with us and acknowledges it. The uncle that is able to sit with us at a table and look at us and hold a space for us, where emotions, where openness, where vulnerability is allowed. That we don't allow. We cut that off immediately within ourselves. So that which we couldn't have as children on the outside, we now have to come to a point where we have to face this in ourselves. You know that thing that you teach your kids, if it's to be, it's up to me. This is our time. And I believe in a world where there is such tremendous chaos from relationships, where we choose to climb out of a relationship so quickly. I'm not advocating a non-divorce thing, believe me. But I do advocate us working at relationships, because we can't bear the emotional intensity of a relationship. So we climb out of it. We can't bear the emotional intensity of not having a line between two countries. So Putin makes war against Ukraine. Maybe it's more complicated. Maybe it's very simple. We can't bear the possibility of sitting and listening to our wife, opening up emotion, or for us to show a vulnerability, to go home and say, I didn't catch as many fish today. I'm in shit.
Yeah. I'll fix that in post. So, I mean, how many stories have we heard of men who have lost their jobs, who, cheers love, I'll see you later after work, and drive around the block a couple of times and go home. Because we carry this shame, this burden of needing to meet the expectations of the society that we live in. And so, like you were saying about the uncle who sits at the table to give us the space, we have to at some point come to grips with the wounds of our fathers and our fathers' fathers and our mothers' mothers, to try and ask ourselves, how are we able to fulfill the needs of our children with the understanding and the awareness of the fact that we didn't have those needs met. And I think we need to figure out how to cross that bridge. I wasn't given X, but I know that my son needs X. I'm going to ensure that my son gets X. Whatever that thing is.
Where is that
thing is. Yeah. Where is the 100%? Where is that platform?
Where are those conversations taking place? It seems to me, from our discussions as well, I've picked up a couple of things that I wondered about. That it seems to me that even in churches, they are rather, and we know that, they maintain the patriarchal structures where there is no vulnerability. There's a pseudo-vulnerability possibly. But
and a pseudo family, dare I say it. I'm going to get into trouble for that one. We love to say, come to church, we're a family. You're not, man. Be honest with yourself. stop it. Stop. It's an F word for me at church. Because we don't know how to be vulnerable. The moment we open our hearts and we let ourselves, people genuinely see, we go, no, none of that. That's therapy. Keep the therapy stuff on the side, please. None of that now. Dinner table, pull yourselves together. We got guests. Whereas, if we were all honest, we're all feeling those things. We're all carrying those pain. You know, we're all carrying the hurt that goes with that stuff. Part of my family is from Viking territory, for the lack of a better kind of geographical, grew up, my ancestors are from Scotland and literally built ships, and they're ancient tales of how important scars were to Vikings. Did you see Uncle Gary's scar on his chest? Go ask him to tell you that story about that bear that attacked him. Did you see Uncle Chris's on his back? Ask him about that story, that scar that he is carrying. But you take that a little bit further and you go, the scars that we are carrying in our hearts, in our souls, about the places that we have been hurt, these wounds. What happens in our lives is the moment somebody presses on that thing, we react in a reactionary way of anger, frustration, push aside, and people almost go, Jesus, why did that react that way? And the wounds that we carry almost create the boundaries so we don't want to talk about those things. But what do? Male bravado goes, let me check, chicks dig scars, right? Oh, well, let's talk about the things that we're carrying that we don't want other people to see. And the moment we are brave enough, vulnerable enough, without quoting Brene Brown, to show people those wounds, people closest to us, people in our community, that's when we stop the thing from going on to the next generation. Because I think you were saying earlier, my son's not going to carry the wounds I'm carrying. I'm not going to allow, it is going to stop with me. I'm going to do my very best to ensure.
But there's the problem, man. There's the problem, that how do men know? And that's where my feeling of desperation for myself and for my society comes in. Is where are the platforms to talk about this? There's a Jordan Peterson that is of late interwoven into many of these beautiful tales and stories of what it means to grab onto the masculine and what it means to create a life for yourself as a man. He's also reacting to something in a very, very hard way and not opening up the platform for emotionality. There's an Angus Buchan that's opening up the platform for men to re-entrench the patriarchal as if it's some moralistic duty. And it fits into the structures of this upper knowledgeable structure that comes down to us and commands us to behave in a particular way and gives us a sense of safety and direction. And then takes us away from that which is the place where we need to go, is the vulnerability as men, to delve into that. And we can't do that alone. It's something in us each as an individual. But as men, we need fathers, we need mentors, we need the rites of passage, the rituals, the processes to help us to sit together as men and delve into the wounds that we carry together. We need to be witnesses for each other. Where is that? And it is continually destroyed. It's destroyed by the patriarchal structures that men have created as a reaction to the wound. We've destroyed the possibility of us sitting together.
we have unfortunately popularized the idea of a Donald Trump.
Yeah.
It is both sides of the coin. Unfortunately, we've got the left and the right. We've got the one side which is going, just keep shouting, just shout as loud as you can, just keep shouting, do whatever you need, just keep on shouting. And then we've got the other side of the coin, and as the pendulum swings to the other extreme, the left, has other ways of responding to the thing. But we put those things on a pedestal, and unfortunately social media elevates those things higher than other things, and so those are the things that we hear, that we see, that we focus on. Those are what our kids are seeing on TV. Those are what schools are talking about on a regular basis, and so that defines our culture, because that's what a leader does, right? So that's what we've got to do. But we don't have an image of a Jesus who cries with his community when two of his close friends, Mary and Martha, lose their brother. One of my favorite stories in the scriptures, and one of the shortest verses in the Bible. Jesus wept, ugly cry, with a community who had lost somebody. But then 10 minutes later, he raises the guy from the dead. So it's an interesting paradox. Like there's a paradox to the story. Like, Jesus, why did you cry with them so much? And then 10 minutes later, raise the guy from the dead and have a celebration, like high-five each other. Because there are loads of questions for me. But one of the things that stand out for me is there is a Jesus who goes down to this degree of empathy that he carries what the people around him are carrying. And he goes, I'm going to hold the space with you and I'm going to sit with you. Let's just be here.
It seems like life cannot be created unless we delve into that communal and individual space of pain and
you have to hold that. Yeah, you have to hold that thing.
The unions talk about eros, and it's connected to the word erotic, but it's eros is the energy of connection. It's the energy of reaching out and feeling connected emotionally, related to people around you. It's the interrelation, the interwovenness of the fabric of our society. It's the energy to connect.
Yeah.
And we cannot make anything alive unless we first have that level of connection.
Yeah. What's the alternative? Jesus goes, Mary, Martha, shush, man, please. I'm going to raise him from the dead. Just relax. Shush.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. That's such a typical masculine response.
That's such a guy response. Don't be that guy. Like, can you imagine him shushing people who are crying because they've lost somebody? And how many times do we do that as a big forgiveness? How many times do we do that as a church? No, shush, man, stop crying. Wipe your, man. There's a plan here. No, there's a plan. No, hide your tears. No. We've got guests.
So many churches seem to, I know from speaking to you and from the connections and communities that I've spoken to, how often churches they also fall under a hierarchical structure, whether it's the head of a particular church or whether it is under a larger banner. There's this conspiracy of silence.
Yeah. And
a fear that if we touch things that are uncomfortable, this is just a broad saying, but under a feminine nature, anything that's uncomfortable, emotional, that comes from instinct, because the feminine to me represents the instinctual, the earthy, and
it's wild and dirty.
Yeah, it's wild, dirty, mucky, and
no, it's not a lie.
No.
That's not a lie.
It's like Men must be away from the woman when she gives birth, and menstruation is a terrible thing.
No, don't talk about that.
No.
Hey, man.
We can't bring those two things together, and yet that seems to be the conversations we need to have, the experiences we need to have.
No, in those relationships, unfortunately, that conspiracy of silence is a real thing.
It hurts all of us.
We will still use 1 or 2 verses in the Bible. 1 or 2 to keep women silent. Not on the stage. And you know what we've done? Very clever bunch of men. Now we'll give you women's ministry. Yeah, go run your own little women's ministry. We'll keep you in your own little room by yourself, have your tea and scones, have your high tea. But on a Sunday, it's just me. No, don't come here with your... Oh, she can sing. Yeah, let her sing.
Don't disturb Father while he's praying in the room.
Don't upset Dad when he's talking. And you know what is an interesting... If we were honest, why do we return home after long journeys? Why?
Straight to mother.
Straight to mom.
Mother's food.
Mom's food.
Mother's arms.
Around the dinner table with what are the things we miss? What are the things we hang on to? Yeah, I want to hear what Dad has to say. But I go home because I want to hear what I want to feel Mom. I want to experience Mom's cooking again. And when I think about church, and where I think about church communities, and where I think the community of the Western Evangelical Church is going, I believe there is a shift that is slowly happening towards the feminine, of what it means to be communal, dirty, vulnerable, instinctual, like you were saying. And people are wondering why churches aren't filling up anymore after COVID. Because we're done with hearing what he has to say.
The church as a masculine-dominated patriarchal structure is dead. It has to become alive with soul again.
It needs feminine spice of... And people often go, male and female. Dean, how dare you come here with your female... No, I'm not starting a feminist movement. Actually, Jesus says, I will gather you under my wings like a hen. Feminine.
It's very important. And I think there is a change happening.
Yeah.
I think there's a challenge, there's a change, there's a kickback, there's a rationalization that's coming against this incorporation of the feminine. And the incorporation of the feminine can only happen, as I always say, this turning inwards, this recognition of who we are as individuals. It can only happen there. And it's a very personal thing that we've got to sit, but it can also happen in community. We need to sit together as men. We need to recognize the wounding of the patriarchal system that has not only taken place towards women and crushing femininity, but it's wounded men as much. And I think once we can open that, we can make as many laws as we want. We can have feminist movements which have done a wonderful job of bringing consciousness to women and empowering women, and hopefully to men as well. But unless we sit together, we've got to be the ones that say we've got to sit together and look inside of ourselves. I know that Jordan Peterson is that kind of thinking is saying, but as men, we need to make sure that we don't lose our strength. Our strength does not lie in standing up and holding on to the old. There's parts of the old, but it's warped. We need to sit, and we need to sit together as men and recognize our masculinity as something which can rise up in a way that gives us strength by incorporating our femininity and looking at the wounds that has happened there. That's the only way. It's an integration, not an exaltation. Sounds like we need to get together as a group of men.
Yeah, I was going to hint at it earlier. You were talking about a platform in a space. For everybody watching and listening, we are dreaming and we are planning and we're putting one or two things into place. It'll probably involve a campfire. It'll involve some pieces of nature. It'll involve coming together as a group of men and having these types of conversations around identifying some of these areas in our lives and holding space.
Well, unfortunately, we've been going for 45 minutes now, and that's very little time for us to explore this. And I think I'd love to know from everybody out there what they think. A 4 or 5 day retreat out in nature, discussing this. Give us some feedback. Please send us some responses on YouTube, Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram.
And give us an idea of what you guys think, what would be useful, and would you be interested in a retreat like that? Because I think it's time that we become part of the solution, not the problem.
Yeah, good. Yeah, on that note, part of the solution and not the problem. Thank you, Konrad. Episode 9.
Episode 9.
It was really amazing, and next week looking forward to episode 10.
We'll be opening up a very special little something, and in lieu of what we've just discussed, bringing the two parts, the male and feminine, together and bringing them to some alchemical mixing. We've got something very special that will be mixed together next week, so please stay tuned for episode 10.
Yeah.
Dean, it's been a real
pleasure. Thank you so much, Konrad. My name is Dean Konrad.
I'm Konrad van Staden.
And have a great week. Cheers.
Cheers.